So 8:02, Mark Ataletta calling the meeting of the Public Works Committee to the RTM to order. Thank you all for coming on a school vacation week. Over the years, I've realized that's a tough week. So thank you. I redistributed the minutes to the previous two meetings earlier today. And with respect to the earlier minutes, the minutes to the March 16 meeting, February 16 meeting. Paige, thank you. Those are the ones you prepared. Are there any comments, questions, edits, changes? None? Seeing none, I'll take actually, we could probably approve both at the same time.
I like your thinking.
With regard to the March 9 minutes,
I didn't see.
Caroline did those. Any questions, comments, edits, corrections? Seeing none, I will take a motion
So
to
moved.
approve the minutes of February 16 and February 9 as published.
Who's taking
I
minutes
so moved.
today? Oh, yeah. Okay.
And is there a second?
Second.
Great.
Excellent.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
No, I'm abstaining.
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't at one of the meetings, so I can't vote.
So we got 10 now.
From what I've always understood, you don't have to be at a meeting. I'm not suggesting you change your vote, but I've always understood you don't have to be at a meeting to approve
To
the
vote for the
minutes,
minutes.
to review the minutes and approve the minutes.
Hmm.
So I leave
I
it to your
disagree,
discretion.
but that's all right.
That's fine.
I'm going to
So,
abstain.
one abstention.
Okay. All right.
Very good. Next item, this is a special meeting, so I will be following the agenda as published. And will not be entertaining any motions not on the agenda, or topics not on the agenda. Next topic up is upcoming RTM items. These are more of the nature of just announcements. The first is, and Rolf actually, I think, distributed an email in the past regarding the town of Darien has recently completed and will be holding a public information session on May 11 relating to the drainage study. And we'll talk about that one in more detail. I did circulate a link with information to that, I think to the drainage study and the information session details on May 11th. So we'll touch on that when we move to focus groups under flooding. A second item under the topic of upcoming items is, this one will go to my notes. There was going to be an item on the agenda of the upcoming RTM related to the placement of dynamic speed signs.
Yep.
Let me get my notes on that. So the background on this one, for those who are not aware, is the Darien Police Commission, acting as its authority as the Darien Legal Traffic Authority, let's just use LTA, requested the Board of Selectmen to propose an acquisition of 4 TAPCO dynamic speed signs back in March of 22. The initial thought was that the LTA was that they could potentially be funded under the ARPA program being pursued at the time. Ultimately, those funds were not available. These signs, if you're not aware, are going to be installed on Mansfield, State Road 124, in the area of Ox Ridge, and the upper part of Hoyt Street, that's State Road 106. The police department staff and our public works department staff have, over the past year, made repeated attempts to try to get pricing and a schedule for delivery on these. They finally recently were able to get those pricing. The signs that they're pursuing are the ones that are similar. I've seen the ones down at the library. And I think there's one
Post Road.
Post Road. I understand there's one over at
Holmes
Lower
School.
Hoyt,
Yeah.
and I've seen the one over by Holmes. So the idea was that there'd be a special appropriation for these to get them, get the order processed and procured so that they can maybe have them in place for the fall year. Some residents have been following up and asking, where these signs are. The total quote for the signage, $32,972. Ed has estimated about a couple $1,000s in miscellaneous installation-related costs. And so I understand in some back and forth with Jack Davis of the Finance and Budget Committee and James Palin of the Board of Finance, that the idea was, well, the Board of Finance did approve a transfer of $40,000 from the capital reserve for non-recurring items.
Expenditures.
Yeah, to cover the engineering portion of the study. Sorry, I switched topics on you.
I'm like, no, there's-
Yeah, give me a second. Oh, wrong one. Wrong one.
I know. I'm like, you don't need to say signs, please.
Yeah, no. I think this one's being funded by a non-recurring appropriate.
It is.
It is, yeah.
Whether it come out of general or.
Yeah, they went back and forth on it, decided to take it out of non-recurring expenditures. So it will not be coming before the RTM.
Now, that will be this year's?
Yes.
Yes.
No, it
Yes.
says it was coming
Yeah.
before. The letter
It's
said
on
it
the-
is coming, and then.
It's coming out of this one.
Right.
Yeah.
It said as soon as possible, so I guess
Yeah.
the next RTM, but I don't think we need to vote on it.
It's not coming before the
It's referred
RTM.
to us, yeah.
It's not
It's
coming
not
to
coming
you.
before the RTM.
It's coming out of,
It doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to.
Doesn't have to.
Because it's
It's coming out of town.
yeah, so this is just informational.
This is just
That's why I was just
FYI.
clarifying.
Yeah, because if it was coming before the RTM, we would have been added as secondary
Understood.
because we're installing them.
So
this was a discussion.
35 grand, next question.
Yeah.
Yeah, why isn't the state paying for them? But they're both state roads.
Those are state roads, yes.
So, and then the next item is what I started to talk about, which is the retaining wall at the Norotan Heights Fire Department. If you've seen, and I will circulate some information on this, but there is the retaining wall that keeps up, basically, if you know where the Norotan Heights Fire Department is, the bulk of the activities take place at the lower level, and there's a retaining wall.
Right.
And it's in disrepair. There's some pictures, and so on that one, the town has been working with the Norotan Heights Fire Department, and the idea there is to appropriate, the Board of Finance did approve a transfer, again, from the Reserve for Non-Recurring Expenditures, $40,000. The idea here is to fund the engineering study
Stop it.
for the repair on the retaining wall.
We can't
Just repair it.
repair it?
Sorry.
Well, no.
Oh, they need an engineer.
They need
though,
an
to make sure
engineer.
that
Figure out
it's
what needs-
repaired.
Right, so
With
the idea
engineering
is
integrity.
to fund the study, okay? And so there's no need for a special appropriation. The details that were given is that the Norotan Heights Fire Department and staff, because of the proximity of the retaining wall, it need to get a study done and get an idea of what the cost is going to be, what's the extent, how extensive is it, and then try to get a real
40,000.
firm cut. Yes, yes.
Is it possible the study's gonna cost more than the actual work? I don't think
No,
so.
this
That's
one- I
don't
what's
think so.
got
Can we
problems.
apply the
Yeah.
study?
This is
for
gonna be
future
expensive.
work?
Yeah, I agree.
So the Board of Finance removed this budget item from this year's budget until there's an accurate
study.
estimate.
The cost of the study.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry, they took the cost of study out of the budget because it's happening or because?
Because it's gonna do it out of special
Got
transfer,
it, okay.
okay?
And then the thing will come back.
So
Oh, yeah.
would have come out of
they'll-
last
yeah,
year.
Once
That'll
that
come back
study's
around.
complete, they'll come back, because then the engineer's gonna say it's gonna cost $1 billion,
Yeah.
and we'll have to vote on that.
Yeah.
Yep. So then F&B met on this on, I think, the 17th, and they're supportive of both removing it from, funding it from the capital reserve and removing the remaining capital item until more accurate cost estimates are in hand. And then Board of Finance is of the opinion that when it does come back around, we should be working closely with Public Works and the Norotan Heights Fire Department as this comes together as a cohesive project. So Nothing coming before us. This went around and around with RTM.
It's quite
Rules Committee
amazing,
as
the
well.
wall can cost so much.
It's a big.
We don't know how
Yeah,
much.
if you have a chance to drive by, it's
Yeah.
It is a big.
quite something to see, so.
Yeah, no, my son is there.
Oh,
He
so
goes-
you're-
He's at the fire department, he volunteers there.
Oh,
But I
okay.
never noticed the wall.
Yeah, you kind of drive by,
I
right?
just kind of don't pay attention, now I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it, like, yeah, that's a big wall.
Yeah, it is a big wall, for sure.
It is a big wall. It is set back from the highway,
Yeah.
not the highway, the roadway.
The roadway.
So I don't think it's going to encroach
At the
on the
moment.
roadway. Well, you're right, if it comes down. It is precarious when you're down there at ground level. You look up, you see the retaining wall, you see the pieces that have been dislodged, and then there are boulders. I don't know if those boulders were subsequently put there to try to extend
Fortified. or
the
whatever.
period.
Yeah.
But it does, I'm not an expert, but it sure
Yeah.
does seem like something needs to be done before something happens. One of the things I've observed over the years I've been on RTM is things, when government does something, cost much more than when the private sector does things. There's certain procedures that need to be followed, bidding
Yeah.
processes that need to be followed.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, comparing to the private sector, just anecdotally I've observed is,
Yeah.
I don't know what, it's 2X. No, I came to that about a decade ago. I just accepted it 11 years ago. It just is. It just is.
Safety.
So that's it with respect to the topic of upcoming RTM items. So with that, we can roll into focus groups. With the first one listed is Great Island. Who's Great Island?
I'm Great Island.
Any update you want to provide there?
I could just basically read from the information that was sent out. I don't have
Okay.
any more information.
All right. Nathan.
So, there was this is the Bloomberg announcement of the purchase of Great Island. I thought that was interesting. The highlight here is,
Gatsby-esque, that one.
yes. Paints us well, right? I think everybody probably knows. So the original cost was going to be 103 million. The final price was 85 after due diligence. Does anybody know why the price went down? Specific reasons? We're allowed
Yeah,
to
I
say?
think they negotiated on a number of
Okay.
issues that exist on the island that are gonna have to be addressed.
Okay,
Okay, and we don't know the specifics of that at this point.
okay, okay.
Those are probably future appropriations.
Yes.
I would just encourage folks to maybe watch the last Rules Committee meeting. You were there.
I was at that.
There was a fairly extensive discussion about the discrepancy between the 85 and the 103 and what's in there. Much of it appears, can't be disclosed at the moment because we're under a non-disclosure agreement with the sellers. And there was a great deal of discussion at that meeting around about 6.27 million, which has already been earmarked of the 103 approved allocation or appropriation to start to address some known issues. And there's been a fair bit of discussion about whether the RTM should be included in that process or not. I draw no conclusions or judgment about it. It's widely under discussion among certain groups. So I would encourage you to watch that meeting, though. Jim Palin spoke, although extemporaneously, he didn't have prepared remarks, and there was a fair bit of discussion. It's probably worth watching.
I agree. It was discussed, and there's several things that I learned. The first is we approved the appropriation for the purchase at I'm around it, the full amount. And as such, they have discretion to spend it if the price came in lower. There was some discussion that night from a breakout circulated by Jen Tarneski, the finance director, that just had some broad categories totaling to about $6.5 million in the nature of site prep, access, things of that nature, which dovetails a little bit with the charge of the Great Island Advisory Committee, which I'll touch on in a moment, unless you're going to touch on that. But there's some costs that now are being able to be covered, and also proceeds from the bond issuance as well, are being used to cover some of these, I'll call them ancillary costs related to getting that site into a condition to be accessible, which is the word that's used in the advisory committee charge. Then there's, of course, issuance fees and things of that, and they've also rolled a portion on the bonding side of the Hindley Homes, what's it, the Royal, is it Royal? Third school?
HHR.
And so that was part of, it is worth, I will send a link, that is a good conversation that James participated in the dialogue around the room. Really got into some of the details of how an appropriation and a bonding work, and the flexibility that's required in that when you issue bonds to a certain extent to allow for things, and in this case, how they're going to be used. Very fortunate the price came in lower, but as I think Rolf and maybe one other here said, there are costs associated with getting that site in a condition to be accessible. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
But
Sorry.
anything else you wanted to touch on?
I think that was it. Let's check. No, that's really it.
That's it for now.
Yep.
Was there any dialogue at the rules about what happens to the equestrian business that's there?
Yeah, there was no specifics discussed. The nature of the discussion wasn't of specifics. It had to do with the appropriation, the ramifications of the price being less. I think that we were, at the time, the town was going for bonding in, I think the quote was 72 hours. So 2 or 3 days we were going for bonding, and what the bonding was going to be used for, recognizing that we had authorized the ability to go for bonding at much greater than the 80-some-odd million, the final purchase price. There was also some discussion, I think that same night, the Board of Selectmen approved the Great Island Advisory Committee charge. This is an advisory committee that's being put together by the Board of Selectmen as it relates to the acquisition of Great Island. Has anyone seen, has anyone received a draft of it? The idea, that's it. Yes, Seth did send this around, I thought so, which is why I didn't resend it. The intention is to put together a committee, because the Board of Selectmen believe that it's necessary to carry out the mission of, at least this initial committee, to set up, to pursue the initial mission of, point I noticed here was create infrastructure plans and related projects that will enable residents to safely access the property and present the details and the costs of the plan and the project to the board for approval. So there's some other things here, but this initial board, and from what I understand, I've been on or participated in 2 different advisory boards of the Board of Selectmen. One was which one was, the Public Works Garage Building Committee. As former chair of this committee, I can't remember if it was ex officio or an actual member, but participated in that one. And that advisory committee is actually the prototype on which subsequent building committees have sort of been modeled. They've been tweaked around the edges, but that was, in my recollection, the first time that the committee had been put together of diverse participants from town government, outside government, RTM, and, a Public Works Committee. And then I also participated in the advisory board, as it was called back in the recycling committee. It's changed its name multiple times, but it was the recycling committee when it was first formed by the Board of Selectmen back then. So this what's suggested here, and they may have tweaked this in its final version, was that the initial committee membership would consist of 9 members, including 3 full-time Darien residents appointed by the Board of Selectmen, 2 selectmen, and that the moderator to the RTM or an RTM member designated by the moderator. I believe in rules it was decided that the moderator will take nominations, and there'll be a vote on this representative from the RTM on Monday night. Let's see.
And I think the number of
They tweaked it.
residents is up to 4 now.
Up to 4.
And then I think they reduced the.
P and Z
selectmen.
became ex officio.
Yeah.
P and Z became ex officio.
Yeah.
So the other members, the chairman of the Board of Finance, originally P and Z is now off, and Parks and Rec Commissioner will be on as well. So yes, so now it's 4 members of the public, and P and Z is in ex officio. And so I will go through the charges. I hit the one that are already, but, so of course it's to nominate officers, a membership chairman, who shall be a selectman, which I thought was interesting. Prepare and make regular meeting schedule, the whole Robert's Rules, things that a committee does. Identify, interview, and recommend to the board such professionals, consultants deemed necessary to advise the committee on its charge, including the terms under which they will serve. Provide oversight on those selected professionals. Then the one I read, create infrastructure, and I keep coming back to that because I think that one's directly relevant to this committee. Develop an operating budget, capital budget, and estimates for any infrastructure. Again, the word infrastructure is used here. Plans or related projects to the presentation of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM. Develop and submit applications to town, state, federal regulatory authorities for whatever work is contemplated. I suspect there's a lot of authorities involved there, given it's wetlands and coastal. Provide oversight on the projects and expenditures. Report to the board at least once a month on updates, and provide financial updates monthly to the Board of Finance. And then the board will update the committee's charge and expand committee's charge and clarify its responsibilities and longer-term tasks. These are one-year terms, and get renewed or each year. So I do think that now what's unclear to me is whether members of the public can also be RTM members, or
They talked about that.
yeah.
I was there at the meeting. when
Oh, they talk. Okay, could be, right?
They talked about it but Kate, our town administrator, said, that she couldn't imagine that a advisory commission of this nature would not have as part of its meeting agenda to allow for public comment.
I think that's part of Robert's Rules, isn't it?
You don't, as I think you know, though, that you don't always have to allow
Yeah,
public
that's true.
comment.
That's true.
Okay?
That's true.
So they could decide one meeting that, we're meeting, but we're not allowing public comment today. Or another meeting could be.
Yeah, that's true.
We welcome public comment today. Is there anybody here from the public who would wish to comment? So they're kind of leaving it at the discretion of the commission.
Right, but 4
It's not a
members of the
it's not a
public.
commission.
All right.
No, that's not a commission.
Advisory committee.
Advisory committee.
Excuse me.
Yep, it's an advisory.
And advisory, which means it has no
Yeah, yeah.
authority to do anything.
And no contracting authority either. That's an important point I learned on my previous,
It does the contracting.
all the parties, the town.
Yeah, it's.
Town, it goes through the same channels.
And in this particular phase, I think a lot of it's going to fall into public works.
I agree, at least in the initial phase.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know, but from what I've been gathering, access as in roads, that's public works. Okay, just as an example.
Here, if I may, here's the issue I have. This is described as an initial, right? I think that's the official term that they're using, is initial.
That's right.
So I don't know what permanent versus initial means.
There is no permanent committee.
But they actually use the word initial.
Well, they say at the end, we'll come back to you and tell you what your new charter is.
Yeah. So that's one point. The other point is, there are a lot to discuss infrastructure without knowing what the plan is going to be, seems, a little back-asswards, if you ask me.
Putting the cart before the horse?
Well, that's another way to put it. So I think it would be appropriate, if we're going to be deeply involved in this, the Board of Selectmen has the authority over the fund to use the funds as they see fit. They have already been approved by the RTM and already appropriated, and the Board of Selectmen may use those funds however. So, to a large extent, anything that we discuss here is purely advisory. We have no authority over the use of these funds, none. That's my read of this. The funds have already been approved.
Appropriated, right.
Appropriated and approved and appropriated. So the RTM really doesn't have I mean, to take this to the extreme, the RTM doesn't really have a role here.
Until $18 million has been spent.
What
Yes.
was discussed,
Right,
actually,
up to the amount that's been,
It's when they come, see,
Or until operating budget funds begin to be expended for it,
Yes.
which there are none in the current budget.
and I don't think 18 million is going to, my personal opinion is it's not all going to be available. My sense is, and I don't have anything other than a sense, other than just taking little bits of information here and there, is that about 12 million of that is going to be used, it's just obligations that have shifted from the seller to the buyer. And so how that all shakes out is what's under the cone of silence at the moment, and we'll probably...
that's my sense, having toured the site. I don't know how many folks here toured the site when its tours were being done. I remember thinking, as I toured the site, to get this site even in a condition to where public can simply walk it, tour it, whatever. It has nothing to do with what the future use is. Things had to be done.
Oh, yeah.
It was not, it's private land, it's not a park set up.
Right.
No, the plots, I don't know, what are you gonna do with that?
There are rental residences there, and thought needs to go into how do you preserve those people's rights under there. So my takeaway in the initial phase is that there's, as you said, a lot of costs associated with taking care of things that have to be taken care of that would have fallen on the seller or the buyer.
And I would like to hope that we are at least brought into the discussion and consultation, given that we do have some purview and conversation with the Public Works Department.
Well,
But
one thought would be to be the nominated entity, someone from this committee nominated,
Does anybody have interest?
to be on that committee, on that advisory committee.
I would agree. I'd like to hope that it's more than one person. But, I mean, in the
Like
overall scheme of things.
Right, it could be at least one, and then the 4 members of the public. I don't know if the public, someone from the RTM is precluded from being a public, that I don't know.
I don't see why they
I don't
should be.
see, right, it should be open to the public, presumably, but doesn't mean at the exclusion of everybody else. So,
Let the lobbying begin.
Well,
Yeah.
is that something, the nominations, will that take place on Monday?
no, the nominations, I think, can go to the moderator at any time.
Has this been publicated out to the RTM?
I don't know.
Well, I think that would be a good thing to do, considering the meeting we're talking about is this coming Monday, isn't it?
I don't think they could put it out, and if they did, I don't think rules acted on that, did they? For the
On
agen-
the
for
agenda, is Great Island is on the agenda. I'm pretty certain.
Yeah, but just in a broad scheme. I think if they were going to do a vote on something, it would have to have been approved by rules to put it to a vote, right?
I think it's on the agenda. Has it not been distributed? Is it Monday? Is the agenda out?
It's not Monday.
It's the following Monday?
It's the following Monday.
Oh, well, then maybe.
I think it's the 20, no.
No, that's
That
Monday.
was the 17th.
Yeah. it's-
Oh, maybe you're right.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah,
sure it's
the
Monday the
17th.
17th.
Yep.
No, I haven't seen anything about
Yeah,
it.
the
So-
package hasn't come out yet, probably comes out tomorrow.
Well, yeah, traditionally,
Well,
she
so
usually
that's the
puts that out on
case.
Thursday.
Just one
It's only
nominate
Tuesday. Yeah, it's only
oneself,
Tuesday.
or it should, does
Yeah,
anyone
what's the
from this
process for
committee
nomination?
want to be nominated?
I think, if I remember what Seth said, they would treat it the same way they do with the Ethics Committee.
Take nomination.
and they'll just take nominations from the floor.
Which, if I recall, on ethics, you can self-nominate, you can take nominations from the floor,
Yeah.
and nominations are made prior to that evening. So I took it exactly the same way I think you did. So my takeaway from that was if we were inclined to think someone should be on that we could, anyone could nominate, so.
Well, I'd be interested, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm not going to be there on Monday.
Do you need me to be nominated?
Probably not.
No, probably not. So, yeah, I, having served on advisory committees before,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to if that.
Well, if you want to do it.
I'm happy to.
You got a lot on your plate.
My thought is I'm going to be sticking my nose into it to the extent where I'm not precluded whether I'm on the committee or not.
Right.
Just because we're public works, and it's going to be a public works,
So that feels like two nominations to me.
so.
No, I will defer to Mark. He's got far more experience.
Well, under, being this is a special,
There's 4 slots, right?
so,
Well, for the public,
One RTM.
yeah, but I think the
Yeah,
public
but
slots
it's-
are going to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Those are not
Yes,
coming,
yes,
those are not
that's an
coming.
interview with the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
Okay, like
So
any
this one-
advisory.
yeah, so this was deferred to the moderator. The moderator has chosen, as of the discussion rules, to take nominees and to have a vote on Monday.
That's a good point. How does the Board of Selectmen choose the members of the public? Do the members of the public?
Yeah, you submit an application,
Okay.
you give, whatever, your background, resume, qualifications,
And then you have an
interests,
interview.
Yeah.
maybe some involvement you've had in the community, so on and so forth. Please select me,
So maybe
okay?
we should do both, so that we're sure to have somebody somewhere,
Yep.
right?
So I will, given this is a special meeting, we can't, or we shouldn't, I don't believe we're supposed to have a motion and act on any business necessarily, so I'm just sharing information.
Okay.
I'm happy to, if nominated. If not, I'm still going to participate to the extent I'm allowed to, so. And I encourage this committee to do so as well. I think we're going to get busy come May, whatever it is, on the closing date. So mostly I wanted to share that with this committee. We're going to be busy, we're going to be involved as much as we probably want to be.
And anyone who's interested in being nominated as one of the members of the public should be emailing the first selectman.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, if you want to.
Yeah, and I'm not crystal clear on what that process is, but I expect they can select.
Well, I know they discussed the fact that they wanted to keep a political balance.
Yeah,
per
there's
se.
a minority
No-
rule in there, no
Yeah.
more than 6 of the majority party, which makes it interesting in the RTM, which is is it not the
Non-partisan.
not the partisan, I said not the nomination.
At times it feels like that.
Non-partisan.
There's no separation. If you're on the RTM, it doesn't preclude you from being a public member.
I agree.
Of the public to go and ask the
I agree.
Board of Selectmen for.
Agree.
I would think so.
I agree. I'm not a lawyer or an expert.
But to your point, though, it will come down to whoever is appointed, that they still have to abide by the minority rule.
It's like the Board of
Yes.
Selectmen
Yes.
itself.
Yes.
They have that.
Yes.
Yep. So,
Any of these public committees.
One of the notes that I was thinking in the run-up to this is that it makes the budget discussions right now really important in terms of what's on Ed's plate, what's on the town's public works agenda, because there's always been the opportunity for Great Island projects to start to consume, 50, 60, 70, and to overwhelm what the plans were for the year. So kind of locking in the discussions around budget right now to make sure that any projects that are sitting there that could become victims of kind of focus for this year, it's important to do that, I think, in concert.
yeah,
That's a great, and almost to the point where in the public works budget, we almost have to have a few lines reserved for future use, I mean, because
As
how
far
do
as
you budget for
resources?
something?
as far as resources.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they were really clear this year, in terms of time, but they were clear during the budgeting process, anytime that the topic came up, that no, Great Island activities are not included in
Yeah.
in any of the budgeting capital or operating.
Yep.
But it's a matter of focus an opportunity. So they've got the appropriation for Great Island, never the twain
For
shall
this
meet.
year, or for last year.
For la-
From last year for this year.
For this year, right. But as it goes into the year, then, you know.
Yeah.
Yep. To be fair, I believe town resources, public works resources and personnel have been utilized throughout this process as well. I see mentioned in this charge twice, consultants, professionals, outside consultants. In this initial phase, I don't know, but I'd be hard pressed to see major projects get designed, implemented, and pursued with staff on that short of a runway. Some of these things, I suspect, take time. Some of them have probably been researched, and outside parties are going to do the work and be supervised by this committee.
Roads,
Do
drainage,
a
sewer,
study.
I mean, the big
Studies.
chunk items that you gotta get done up front are all gonna come out of that shop, so, and with the external resources that he
Right.
uses. on-
I just watched the planning that goes into every budget, and it's like looking out a year. We're going to touch on budget here in a moment. But-
I mean, we need the plan for the Great Island in order to know what infrastructure to put in place.
Isn't that what this advisory committee?
Yeah, I think-
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a statement, decisions regarding the property's use,
Yeah, there you go.
including capital operating investments,
So that's-
must be made with great care and take into account input from town residents, as well as all the provisions of the town's long-term plan of conservation and development. Right, we have a town plan of conservation and development. I think that was last done in 20.
It's done every 10 years.
Yep, I can't remember last
That's going
time
to
it
come
was
up in the
done,
next
though.
couple of years for renew. We'll probably have some involvement in that as well.
I think it's in 2026.
So,
Yeah, here it is. The work includes, and not limited to, widening roads, establishing initial determining property hours, creating required signage, required remediation of certain environmental issues, managing and control of existing improvements. I think those two categories are probably immediate before you start building roads and things of that sort. From what I saw,
Yeah.
those need to be done. And going to my comment I made about things costing more with government, things take longer as well. When you're talking about these types of things, you don't just remediate, whatever it is that needs remediating.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
This is not putting up a signage. Anyway, that's that, but I did want to touch on how they're going to fill at least that RTM slot. Where are we up to? I think we're up to budget. Is that the next one? I don't want to go out of order, so let me look.
flooding.
Flooding. That's you. Who else? Is that you too, Vince? Who else is flooding?
Oh, that's,
Yep.
Ian, is there anything you would like to say?
Go for it.
Oh, okay. Well, I brought it up in previous meetings, brought it up when Ed was here, about we have 3 studies that have been outstanding, and what are the results? And we hadn't received any information. I went to the last Board of Selectmen meeting, and I really wasn't going there for that purpose, frankly. But in the course of the meeting, Kate, our town administrator, brought up the fact that she was recommending that the ARPA committee be reformulated to review the projects to be funded by ARPA, because the study for the Coach Lamp drainage has made it clear that the cost and scope of that project is far beyond what was earmarked for the funding through ARPA. The funding through ARPA was earmarked to be 1.5 million, and apparently the report says that if adopted, would cost more in the neighborhood of about 6 million. There's also an issue where the timing, the ARPA funding must be completed by 2026, and because of the larger scope than what was anticipated for this project, they felt that it would be unlikely they could be completed by that time and would not comply with ARPA requirements in the calendar. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, that's a bit of interesting information. So I stood up and I just basically said to them, this is interesting news here that you're sharing with us tonight. We've been waiting for the reports. We still have not seen the reports. I would like to ask that you please release the reports. And lo and behold, email came out, what was it, Thursday of last week?
Yeah, it was like a couple of days later.
Where the report for that particular study has now been released. You forwarded it out to the committee, as I
The
recall.
link, I forwarded the link.
The link. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to look at it.
Is
It's
that
a very
That's the Saltbox Lane one, or is that?
Saltbox and Coach Land, that area.
Yeah.
Okay, those two roads come down onto Post Road. I'll give you a quick summation, because I did read it, particularly the executive summary. It's an over 350-page report. But from the summary, it said that basically the drainage piping that's in that area is, at best, can support a 5-year storm.
Not even. Yeah.
And they're recommending that the project go forward to rebuild for a 50-year storm. So it'd be a huge upgrade to the quality of the drainage in that area, vis-a-vis $6 million estimate and a long-term project. So that's where we are with that at this point. I'm still waiting for the other two reports. There's a report for Bailey Avenue. That report, by the way, is on the website, even though it has not been officially released, okay? If you go on the website and do a search for
I'll send a link.
documents
I'll
and then Public Works, and within there you'll see various different documents, all related specifically to Public Works, and both of these reports are posted there, okay? The quick summary on the Bailey is the fact that two factors apparently contributed to the flooding that took place there. One was that there's apparently a large buildup of growth and obstruction in the area that retards flooding, if you will, that should be cleared. And the other issue is the culvert that runs under the railroad. And that particular day, when that flooding was so huge, that the culvert simply just wasn't large enough to accommodate the amount of water that was being asked to go through. And so it backed up and it flooded that area. But it was a combination of the two. So one thing, I think something could be done about it, whether or not anything will be done about it is still not clear. Technically, the report hasn't even been released. The third report, which is for the area from Tilly Pond through Schwab and goes right by your store.
Just got flooded twice.
There you go. That report is not on the website. It is still in process. So I can't say anything. There's no real information available that I know of. I bumped into Ed last week. There was a sewer commission meeting, and so I asked him about what was going on and with regards to releasing the information, and he said, well, I'm leaving at the end of this week. I'll be away for the rest of the month. And so if you're wondering why that meeting is May 11th and not sooner, I think it's primarily due to the fact that Ed's out of town. Okay, and so his soonest availability apparently is May 11th. Okay, I certainly would have enjoyed learning sooner, but here we are.
The ARPA funding, is that just for the salt box?
No, if you look up the ARPA funding committee or whatever, there's numerous projects that are covered under ARPA.
But I mean, of the flooding,
I think the Tilly Pond is also listed in that ARPA funding for about $1 million.
Right, just a placeholder number.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
but we don't even still at this point know. That could be another surprise for all
It's
we
gonna
know.
have the same deadline
okay?
too, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Same
Yeah,
deadline.
it'll be subject to the same deadlines. So,
What happens if they don't complete the project by what the town has to relinquish the funds?
Or you
Well-
just want something else, I guess.
I heard that there is some flexibility in the legislation that would allow for, some extensions, but I don't know if that's real or not.
What's ARPA again?
Hmm?
ARPA fund, what is ARPA?
Free.
American.
Is that what you did?
American Recovery Plan Act, it was passed by Congress to basically,
It was free money or available money that came to us that
We could use it.
everybody else paid for that we could use.
Yeah, it was dispersed, the monies were dispersed the money went to the state, and the state then dispersed that out to the towns. And our disbursement was a little over $6 million. Okay, but clearly that ARPA list, for the town of Darien at least, is subject to change because of the changing circumstances that are happening right now. And so, yeah, there's another possibility that the Tilly Pond could be pulled out as well for similar reasons. And that frees up, if that would be the case, that would free up $2.5 million that would be utilized elsewhere for projects that could be done more quickly, but they'd have to be ready to go.
And I think that's why Kate wants to move on that quickly, because there's an appropriation deadline and a spend deadline. And the appropriation deadline, I think, is at the end of this year. Maybe it's the end of 2024. Don't quote me on any, but
Yeah, I think you're right.
So we crossed the appropriation, but now, since we're reallocating over half of the money, potentially, Kate wants to get it kind of, so that we don't put ourselves in a place where we could jeopardize it.
Because if we can't put it to work, they want to be able to find another place to put it to work, so that we don't
Oh,
lose
yeah.
the funding.
You don't want to lose the money, so
It's really out of one pocket into another if it's all engineered the right way.
maybe it can go to the wall at the fire department.
Right.
It's free
Sounds
money.
like no one's gonna be-
Which is a shorter term project.
Or
for
now
sure.
that we got the coach lamp and salt box kind of steady back, and there is a plan for it, that they could accelerate on that and pull it away from the other. So I could pull it away from like Tilly Pond, where they don't even have a study back yet.
Right.
Yeah, there's definitely some
Shift.
moving variables, if you will, okay? My fear is that the salt box project is just gonna fall out, and I don't wanna let that I don't wanna see that just go nowhere. It has to be addressed, in my opinion. A 5-year tolerance on the drainage is totally inadequate.
Was there
What's-
flooding there that caused that study?
Say what?
When we had that last series of storms, was there a lot of flooding on Saltbox?
Oh,
Is that
yeah,
what
yeah,
caused it?
yeah.
Oh,
If
okay.
you have a chance to open up and read the report, there are photographs, and they were definitely flooded out. They had some photographs that go back to the 1930s. Apparently, there was a pond in that area at one point in time, okay?
Wow.
So,
That's a yellow flag right there.
Well, it's interesting, the watershed studies that were done back at Superstorm Sandy, I think it was the aftermath of Sandy, was it 3 or 4 watershed studies, how much of this area was filled in?
I have another question though on ARPA.
Yeah, it's not unusual.
Another question on ARPA though is, does it have to fund 100% of a project, or can the town say, we'll do
No.
half and ARPA does the other half?
I think,
yeah, I think there's flexibility
Yeah.
there where, parts could come from ARPA and other parts could come from tax funding. But, I think everybody's interest was to try and get these projects done through ARPA, and that we didn't have to get involved per se. But I don't think that's coming to pass, certainly not in the case of that particular project, the salt box, Coach Lane area.
I've not read the study yet, but is the scope of the project within what was contemplated in the ARPA funding? I mean, what often happens is the scope of what's necessary is disproportionate with what
Well, there's a map where they
scope slash
put
cost.
dots to show you where the problems areas exist, and it's a pretty good area, okay? Whether that was within the initial idea of the scope versus what they're recommending, I don't know. But, yeah, it covers all of course, that goes around in like a U. It connects off of, I forget this road here, but it comes down in a U up down the post, and then the other road, salt box, is up in this area. And it's all in this total area of these 2 streets where all that flooding took place.
Okay, so a number of houses.
Oh, yeah, there are multiple houses. That's the other issue that I'd like to bring up, not that we can necessarily take action tonight, special meeting.
No, this
But,
is just an update.
The notice that's come out so far was a notice that went to District 4, okay?
Well, that was
On this,
a unilateral
just
decision.
let me finish.
Okay.
In the case of this committee, that's you and I, okay? So that leaves, did anybody had you not sent that out, none of you other people here would have even known that there was a report meeting that was organized,
Right.
okay? Now, to my thinking, and I sent an email to Seth about this, that this is, in my opinion, an RTM issue, at least. And it's more particularly an important issue for the people who live there on those streets. So how are they gonna learn about it? Okay, so those are questions that are running in my mind.
Yeah, I would hope it's going to be publicized more broadly. You're on, because we're in government, we're on distribution. I was on a distribution for chairs. You were on a distribution because it happened to go to District 4.
Yeah, if I were not District 4, I wouldn't know, per se.
Right.
Okay,
I
so,
would hope that it gets more broadly
so
publicized.
communication
Newsletters through.
is big in my mind about this right now.
Yep.
I shot an email back to Krista McNamara, and I said, are you gonna post this on the town website? Are you gonna post a notice in the paper publication?
Yeah, who's the communications person? That's probably who should be.
And I've received no response.
On the Facebook, the town Facebook.
Yeah, there's a number of outlets. Okay.
Yeah.
We talked about this
Yeah.
at a previous meeting, it's, you know.
Yep. I
no
think we
newspaper.
sprung it on Ed too.
Yeah, we sprung it on Ed. and-
Well, I also mentioned, media, which
Yep.
would encompass certainly Facebook, Instagram, whatever. But I've not received any response to that question at all.
I'll follow up on that.
But I would
because
think at a
do-
minimum,
It should be publicized.
Yeah.
I'm willing, I'm willing, if we can get the announcement printed, I'm willing to
Put
go
it in mailbox.
drive around that neighborhood and put
Yeah, I go for a walk that
an
day,
invitation,
like, every
put
day.
that announcement in
Just
every
pop 'em
mailbox.
in.
I'm willing to do that, because those
Yeah, I
people
would
need
do
to
that.
know,
Absolutely.
and they should be going to that meeting to
100%.
understand what's going on in their area.
Absolutely, agreed. Yeah, and it was also Seagate, and there's a couple others.
Yeah, there are some other, Seagate on the other side of Post Road. I mean, a lot of that water drains under Post Road,
Correct.
through Seagate and into Holly Pond.
Yeah. Well, I live nearby, so I can drop flyers.
I will touch in with the communications person to find out what the plan is to get the word out, share with this
I'm
committee.
sorry, I have a little,
No, you're amped up. You're
We
amped
hadn't
up for
noticed,
this, Rob.
Inspired up. You're passionate, passionate.
So,
You were meant to come to this meeting today.
that's why I try my best to make it here, because I feel strongly about it.
I appreciate it.
I thought it was pages, way too good.
That's
a bonus.
No, thanks, good.
So, if there's nothing else on flooding?
Well,
Oh,
this is not directly related, but it definitely is related. Since we're talking on this subject, it was in June of 2009 that the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted into their regulations that particularly any special application, but applications in general for any site work and improvements, had to have a plan to address drainage. Okay? But that was June of 2009. This town is over 200 years old. There are numerous homes that were built before then where drainage plans were not necessarily part and parcel of the approval of the building. And so there are many plots of land, residence, where drainage today still is problematic. Bailey Avenue, I think, is an example. So the Planning and Zoning Commission has said that part of their upcoming agenda will cover a review of those regulations, because they're considering to expand on those regulations in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what specifically they're thinking about doing, but there was a mention about existing properties.
From what I recall, Ralph, and I could be recalling incorrectly, but those regulations apply to properties where any work is done. So it's not just new development, which is virtually none, right? As soon as you touch a property, it has to be brought up to the current regulations. And I think the
Site-
discussion.
site work.
Site work,
Yeah.
yeah, painting, bathroom, no, but.
Right.
And so I think the concept there was that eventually most places do get work, site
Yeah,
work done.
yeah.
And it's a slow grind.
Torn down, said another
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, yep. So,
But,
you know, is that expedient? No. But there is a mechanism for some modicum of progress.
well, I can just share with
Which,
with all of you that that is coming up by the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's on my radar. I plan on being there for those meetings and discussions and wherever I have an opportunity to give any input, if they're taking public comment, I will do so. I would hope to think they would listen possibly to Public Works to some extent, but that is coming up.
You know, I have been fascinated. I live over on Holly, which has its own litany of flooding
Problems.
over the years.
Yeah.
And I have been fascinated by homes that are having remodeling done or just totally raised, the retention, the extent to which water retention, I don't know what they are, vessels, mammoth things, the size of swimming pools is unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not an expert, but they sure look massive.
well, they're insisting more and more that the water that is on your property
Stay there.
stay on your property.
Right, and be allowed to filter through, you know, back into the aquifer at its own.
Absorption,
Yeah.
I know more about it in another flood-prone area than this one, but.
Yeah, we had, so we had to do it our property.
Okay.
We had to put big pipes and put them in the ground so they can hold on water and then dissipate it as the ground allows it.
Yes.
If there's so yes, clearly, I know.
Infiltration chambers.
There you go.
Yeah, to hold the water, allow it to.
It sounds like an escape room.
I wish it was, but I don't think it is.
So, anyway, just anecdotally, I've observed 40 odd houses on the street. Wouldn't shock me if a dozen have already had
Work
I'll
done.
be
brought into
interested
compliance.
With some of the commercial work, so now they just announced that the stalled project at Palmer's is gonna kick off again.
If-
That Heights
If you've been
Road-
past there.
Yeah,
They've raised.
they've been tearing down.
Right, so that, but they're gonna have to put in, so when they did Darien Commons, they put in this huge change.
Yeah, they'll be doing drainage work as well, no question about it.
Because that culvert's.
Well,
also-
when under Norotan Heights, if you just watch that go in, I was fascinated by that. It looked like parking garage going under there.
Well, it is a parking garage over there.
But I think for our work over the next 12 months, the next 8 months, is that we've got 3 new drainage studies that all got kicked off in after the last bad bout of flooding.
Yep.
That we've learned as a town a lot more about it. We have planning and zoning that's considering action on this. The town's kind of comprehensive floodwater mitigation plan really needs to be updated in a comprehensive way as opposed to a bite here, a bite there, and a bite over here. That we've got enough more information now that it's time to actually sum it all up and say, okay, what's the 10-year plan around floodwater mitigation? Because that's the scale. It's like doing it in one place with the water courses the way they are through town just makes the railroad bridge problem worse
Yes.
and other things. So it's.
If you fix it upstream, it's going to become a downstream
Yeah,
problem.
that's always the
And so
conversation.
we have never gotten a kind of a straight answer in terms of, okay, what's the next major chapter on comprehensive floodwater management for the town?
Yeah, I'm not sure there is one.
We don't have.
There isn't one.
No.
And so that's where it's a little concerning having study after study after study say it's like, okay, there's a $6 million plug in the dike over here, and there's a $3 million plug in the
That's
dike
been the
there.
process, just by my observation, since the previous watershed studies were done, was to comb through those and find the ones that are, I don't want to call them low-hanging fruit, but where you can get some impact at a cost that folks are willing to, and try to do 1 or 2 or 3 a year, and just roll it forward. But yeah, a comprehensive plan, I remember at the time thinking and hearing the perspective that it's overwhelming what needs to be done
Yeah.
throughout town to
Yeah.
remediate it all.
But if you look at projects,
You
if you
can't.
look at like the sewer system and the kind of comprehensive way we're looking at that as a piece of infrastructure for the town,
Mhm.
which is
Roads.
managed on a 50-year basis.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's a finite, I'll comment, that's a finite system that now needs upgrade
Yeah,
And
that's gonna go for a
repairs.
long time.
versus, if this
Yeah,
was
but Jeff's
virgin
point
land,
is
there were.
that's a 50-year plan.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus, we're just,
Well-
let's do a study here,
Well-
study here,
Yeah, we
study
need
here.
something.
Right, no,
And
agreed.
nothing ties it all
Comparable.
together.
Agreed. And I'm just making the point that a finite universe, whether it's the sewer system, it's the roadways, we know that the 50, what is it, 50,
81.5 miles.
have to be redone on a 20-year cycle. Or
What is it?
81.5.
on a 20-year cycle, right? And you could tinker year to year and defer this one to next year, but they're all gonna more or less get done in 20 years. Sidewalks or someone on the existing sidewalk stock is someone on a similar program with different timing for the cement versus the asphalt versus a greenfield, I don't call it greenfield development, but something where we're gonna create a solution to a problem that it doesn't seem
That we
finite.
created.
Yeah, well, we,
Well,
the
and the
collective.
problem is
yeah.
dynamic.
It's dynamic, and it's not finite. If it is finite, it's big finite. Anyway, just the town seems good at better at managing finite projects, finite long-term endeavors.
All right, I'm sorry.
No,
Took us a
absolutely,
little off a
absolutely, don't
tangent
ever
there.
apologize, I appreciate the input. Last item on our agenda is budget update. We had a budget update at our last meeting, and we will take up the budget at our next meeting. I don't know if, I have a couple of comments. I attended I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting on the budget, and I watched the majority of the Board of Finance meeting, was that last week, so I got just two comments, but I don't know if you want anything, anyone wants to add?
I defer entirely to your detailed comments, but.
Well, I don't have
there's not
detailed
a lot that's
comments.
Very interesting.
No, it wasn't very interesting.
The Board of Finance didn't update and had a less in-depth discussion than the Board of Selectmen did, and so we'll get it in 2 weeks, but it's largely unchanged from what was approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Right, Board of Selectmen cut the sweeper,
The sweeper.
which I think we all sort of suspected was coming. And then Board of Finance, I didn't get to the end, but Board of Finance did cut some of Ed's salt, and I think $20,000 of it. If I recall, he was at like 80% or something, he was almost full anyway.
Yeah, he has a lot of salt.
That was kind of a token.
That's right.
To be honest, I didn't get to the last 20 minutes to know if there was anything in the last 20. Did anyone?
I haven't seen it yet.
Not that I saw.
Okay, 'cause I was listening.
Oh, I
to
think
it.
I think I watched the whole thing.
As it relates to Public Works.
Oh,
specifically, yeah, no, we
Public
could,
Works.
yeah. No.
And I don't think there's any
Vigorous discussion of parking,
huge change.
no changes.
Well, that was on the parking discussion. I had forgotten this until it came up at the Board of Selectmen, I think it was the Board of Selectmen meeting, that is funded by the parking revenues. And once that was revisited and focused on, the idea of keeping that reinstatement of the Ranger and taking it out of a budget that, that pool, my thought there was that frees up Ed's FTEs to do what Ed's FTEs are supposed to be doing. If you've got a dedicated Ranger. That wasn't explicitly said, but my thought is you have a dedicated body doing the tickets around town. To the extent Ed had people allocated, it should free some up, at least some hours. His people will still be doing the supporting on the snow removal and the maintenance, but certainly relieved of the ticketing duty. Those are the three major things. I didn't see much else. It wasn't very riveting, but that's good. Ed runs a tight ship, in my opinion. And with that, I don't know, I can't even entertain the notion of other topics. So I very much appreciate you all coming on short notice to a special meeting on a school vacation week. Historically, this has been a notoriously tough week, so thank you. And thank you for your participation and input. And I think we meet the end of this month.
I won't be here.
Don't matter when it is, Mark.
No, I'm glad until May 1st.
Okay, well, enjoy.
Do we need a motion, or are we looking
To
for a
adjourn, yeah, we
motion?
probably need a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Second.
all in favor?
Thank you.